Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I thought I'd just try and do a different sort of angle for you guys tonight. So obviously anyone who is watching on their TV, hopefully this angle will come up on as widescreen as you fill your screen. Please excuse the mess over the back here as well. I'm sure, like a lot of you, that you know how it is. You know, when you have your washing up and you actually just fling it somewhere rather than actually putting it away and taking the time to put it away. So today we are going to be discussing the case of Beverly Allitt. So obviously I'm sure a lot of you guys will have seen the news recently in regards of the case of Lucy Letby, and that's something that we're going to get onto a bit later on, and it is definitely a video that I am looking at. I wasn't too sure whether to do it because obviously I know, even though it's very fresh and in people's minds, I've seen a couple of other channels have already covered that topic, but then I decided I can't really do one without the other. But I thought I'd do Allitt's case first, mainly because one of the officers who actually arrested Allitt compared the two cases recently. I don't know if you guys have seen that talked about in the news. And he basically said that he believes that Letby had read the book on Allitt. And she definitely did. But I think personally, yeah, I mean, at the moment, obviously, yeah, Letby is the talk everywhere. But what we're forgetting is the victims in all this, and you know the comparisons with Allitt, and obviously there's been a few stories with Allitt recently that we're going to come back to later, and the reasons why that obviously she's in the news. So please sit back and hopefully you enjoy it. So Beverly Gal Allitt, she was born on the 4th of October in 1968, and she grew up in the village of Corby Glen near the town of Grantham in Lincolnshire. I haven't been there personally, but I have heard that it's a really nice place. A few people that I know personally, family live up there. Someone actually that I did know that I used to work with has actually moved up there. And so from what I hear, it is a really nice, well-to-do area. So Alec grew up with three siblings, sorry, two sisters and one brother. And her father, Richard, he worked in an off license, and her mother, Lillian, she was a cleaner at her local school. And Alec was a student at Charles Reed Secondary School, which is now known as Charles Reed Academy, because obviously, as we all know, a lot of schools in the UK have changed their name to academies rather than schools. I don't really know why, but it's a thing. I think it's just an Americanization thing that if everything from America seems to come over to England and then vice versa. I digress. Sorry. Having failed the relevant test to enter Kesteven and Grantham Girls' School, so she had applied to go to an all-girls school and she failed the relevant test. I'm assuming this school is a private school. If anyone wants to correct me on that, then they can. Like I said, obviously I will read your comments, and so please do comment below if I don't need correcting on anything. So she left school at the age of 16, and she often volunteered as a babysitter. before taking on a course to train as a nurse at Grantham College. I also want to point out around this time, around the age of 12, it was reported that Allitt, her characteristics had started to change. People started noticing that, she was getting a bit sullen, she was gaining weight, and many doctors or psychologists, they believe that was down to maybe sexual abuse when she was a child. But Allitt has never confirmed this. She's never denied it. But to be honest, with what we're going to come on to later, I don't think anyone would actually believe a word she says. If I'm pretty honest with you, the whole boy who cried wolf scenario. So she was only a student from her course who actually failed to get a job. She was often missing days of her course due to illnesses. Again, something that we're going to come back to later. Medical records show that Allitt to be psychologically disturbed individual who was prone to self-harm. And obviously, those of us who have self-harmed, I have in the past. I know, obviously, it is a very common thing if you do have something traumatic go on in your life, and you do it not really thinking, but you think that it's gonna sort of take that pain away, and what you're doing is just causing a different pain to focus your mind on, and it's only a temporary thing. It's never ever the permanent solution. So around this time, Allitt was seen to wear casts and bandages, which many believe to be factitious injuries. Again, we're going to look at that later. She'll get the diagnosis around, obviously, the crimes that she committed. But obviously, this was noticed on early on, like before her criminal activities. So, those who studied with Allitt, they often told stories of where she would cover the walls of the nursing home in her feces. So obviously, it's not clear if it's her own feces or someone else's, more likely her own. That is, from what I believe, a common thing with individuals with mental illnesses who are in hospital. Like, they seem to do those kind of things with fecal matter. But she would also poo in Tupperware boxes and pop them in the fridge for her flatmates to find. Which, I mean, how she expects people to react to that, I do not know. But yeah, each their own. So, an ex-boyfriend of Allitt's described her as aggressive, manipulative, and deceptive, telling how she would claim to false pregnancy as well as accusing other men of raping her. And despite not being fully qualified, Allitt was offered a 6-month contract at Grantham and Kesteven Hospital, a role she began in December 1990. And the only reason she actually got this role was due to staff shortages. So they were actually quite desperate at this point for people to work, and they took Allitt on at sort of last resort. So she got given the role of the nurse on Ward 4, which was a children's ward. And then in February of 1991, Allitt began her spree where she was on shift looking after 7-month-old Liam Taylor. 7 months old. So obviously completely defenseless. And wouldn't be able to resist her attack. He was completely vulnerable. And it's a common theme with her. I think obviously I don't know if she was looking to get caught, but we're again coming back to that in a bit on what many believe to be her reason for doing this. So he was admitted to the ward with a chest infection, and Allitt actually injected him with a large dose of insulin, and that caused him to actually die on the 21st of February. Obviously, I don't know if I need to explain why that is obviously incredibly dangerous to someone who doesn't have diabetes, but I'm not a doctor, and medical sort of note taking, medical language isn't really my forte. So if you want to Google that, feel free. So Timothy Hardwick, he was 11 years old and he suffered from cerebral palsy. And he was admitted to the ward after having an epileptic seizure. And during his time in Allitt's care, Timothy's heart had stopped beating. And despite resuscitation attempts, he was unable to be revived. And his death was attributed to his epilepsy. But no cause of death was found, and he had passed away on the 5th of March 1991. So obviously there is that cooling off period in between, and I think obviously you could look at that and think, oh well, she's just trying to obviously not make it look so suspicious. If she was doing it every other day, then it would be a bit more suspicious. And it's my thinking on it as well. She wasn't looking to get caught, and obviously you go in hospital, some people do die. Sometimes it can be unexplained. On March the 3rd, 1-year-old Kaylee Desmond was admitted for a chest infection, and Allitt was assigned as her nurse when, on the 8th of March, Kaylee went into cardiac arrest, and she was resuscitated and moved to another hospital within Nottingham. While being examined, physicians noticed a strange mark under her armpit. And an air bubble in her bloodstream. And it appeared to be an accidental injection, and this wasn't actually investigated. I don't know what it is about doctors and, anyone in the medical profession or the emergency services back in the days just didn't seem to want to investigate when things like this seem to be happening. You hear it a lot in older cases where it wasn't investigated properly, and I can't really get my head around that because, I'll cover this a little bit in my Kenneth Erskine video. And you are in a power of trust. You're in, and if you're not doing your job properly, what are you actually doing? So please, if any doctors, nurses, whoever do come across this video, please do your job diligently, because we've seen time and time again what can and what will happen. March the 20th, it's a 5-month-old Paul Crampton. He was admitted with bronchitis, and he was put into Allitt's care when he almost went comatose, and he was found to actually have higher levels, dangerously high levels of insulin, and he suffered 3 more attacks the same day before he was transferred to a Nottingham hospital. And he again had dangerous levels of insulin in his blood, and Allitt herself was actually sent with him in the ambulance to the next hospital with his mother. Like, how malevolent can you actually be to do that, but it just shows you Allitt's sort of mentality, Allitt's belief system, whatever you want to call it. So March 21st, 5-year-old Bradley Gibson, he was admitted for pneumonia, and later that evening he went into cardiac arrest and was resuscitated, and he was cared for by Allitt and transferred to a Nottingham hospital, and he survived. Before Allitt's arrest, actually, Bradley's story was featured in the news that year. I don't know if it was actually the national news or it was just local news, but he was featured in a good news segment about his ordeal that he went through in hospital. March 21st, again, 2-year-old Yik Hung Chan. He was admitted with a skull fracture after falling out of a window, and while he was in Allitt's care, his oxygen levels had dropped twice. And he was transferred to the Nottingham hospital, where his symptoms were attributed to his head injury. Again, that's just the doctors not doing their job properly or not wanting to, whatever the case may be. So this one is really, really shocking. Just on a little side note, I was actually at Emma Kenny's Serial Killer Next Door tour in Southend-on-Sea last night, and there was a bit of a small segment about Allitt, and this murder that I'm going to talk about next, this was actually Emma herself spoke about this. She didn't obviously name names, but she spoke about this particular one, and when she obviously mentioned it, you could have heard a pin drop in the room. Sorry, I keep going on a bit of a tangent, don't I? I'm sorry. So yeah, April the 1st, 2-month-old Becky Phillips was admitted to Ward 4 with a stomach virus. And while she was being cared for by Allitt, Becky went into a hypoglycemic attack. Doctors, however, put this down as colic. You've seen this happen before, and you're still misdiagnosing. She was then sent home that night, where she went into convulsions, and sadly she died in her father's arms. Just for a precaution, Becky's twin sister Katie was brought into a ward, and she too was put into Allitt's care. And 2 days later, Katie went into arrest and stopped breathing, and her brain sadly suffered permanent damage that was due to the lack of oxygen and the amount of time it took to bring her around. It was later discovered this was due to large doses of insulin and potassium, which Allitt had put into the travel milk, into Katie's milk, for the travel to the Nottingham hospital. And at one point during Katie's stay at Ward 4, Allitt was actually holding Katie and crushed her and broke her ribs in the process of doing that. And I don't know if you guys are aware, I mean, I only found this out quite recently. It's actually really difficult to break a baby's ribs because they're so pliable. So it does require a tremendous amount of force to actually do that. Becky and Katie's parents, they were kind of hoodwinked by Beverly, and they believed her innocence, and they actually asked Allitt to be Katie's godmother, a role which Allitt actually accepted. So you don't see any remorse from Allitt about this. And obviously, what I was saying earlier about being on the serial killer next door to her, like that, as soon as that was mentioned, you could have heard a pin drop. April the 9th, 6-year-old Michael Davidson, he was admitted, and he, like the others, was injected and suffered a heart attack, and he was transferred out. Couldn't really find a wonderful lot of information about that child. I don't know if the parents didn't want that information out. I really don't know, but I couldn't find much. April the 13th, Christopher Peasgood came in, and by 4 p.m. he went into cardiac arrest and he was resuscitated. By 7:45 he went back into arrest, was resuscitated, and he was transferred out. 14th of April at 10:45, Christopher King was brought in and suffered cardiac arrest. 2 days later, at 8 a.m., he went into his seconds and suffered a third an hour and a half later. And by 5 to 10, suffered a fourth attack, and he was finally transferred out of all four. 18th of April, Patrick Elstone went into arrest at 4 p.m. 8 p.m., so 4 hours later, he went into his seconds, and he again was transferred out. On April the 22nd, 15-month-old Claire Peck was admitted following an asthma attack, and she was given to Allitt to take care of, and as soon as that happened, she went into cardiac arrest, and she was resuscitated, but soon after, she went into a second attack, and she was pronounced dead. And in her autopsy, it was found to have higher hignocaine in her system. And what hignocaine is a drug that's actually given to people during cardiac arrest, but, and I stress this one, it is never given to babies, because it is such a high dosage drug. On the 12th of April, the test results had come back for Paul Crampton, and it came back with high levels of insulin. And when confronted about the possibility of a mix-up, manager Moira Onions strongly denied her nurses would ever make this kind of error. I mean, like, as we discussed, errors have been made, not just by Allitt. Allitt was deliberate. But you think about the other bits, misdiagnosis and whatnot. Those are mistakes, Moira. During the investigations of the high-level cases, it was linked to Allitt, as she had actually obviously been on shift on each occasion. So they spent a long time devising a chart, and for each occasion they were looking at the dates of when the child came in, when the child went into first, second, third, fourth, so on attack, and looking obviously the date of death on 4 of the children, or babies, and they obviously linked it. Allitt was on each of those days. So April 29th, the police were finally called in, and 3 weeks later, Allitt was arrested for the theft of a key and the attempted murder of Paul Crampton, where after 18 hours of questioning, she strongly denied the allegations. And during the search of Allitt's property, police found an allocation book. So very, very similar to what we've recently been seeing in the Lucy Letby case, which I'm going to obviously talk about in my Lucy Letby video. So if you like this one, then watch that one. So yeah, during the search of the property, the police found an allocation book, which the ward sister Nurse Barker, she used to make notes of which nurse was in care of which child on that particular day, and she would also make copies of this in her own personal diary. And upon inspection of the diary, it was found that relevant pages had been torn out, and these pages were also found in Allitt's house. So Allitt was released on bail and suspended, and she went to live with her flatmate Tracy's family. Well, some say flatmates, some say girlfriends. I can't find information on either. So I'm just going to refer to Tracy as the flatmate. So yeah, she went to live with Tracy's own family, so her mum, dad, brother. Soon after, the family complained of things being moved around, bleach being poured into Tracy's younger brother's bed. He was only 15 at the time. And during a day out, Jonathan, so the 15-year-old, he actually suffered a hypoglycemic attack while they were out in the market. And surprise, surprise, Allitt turns up. Well, Allitt was there, sorry. And, gave Paul a sweet, and he came round, and, obviously the family were grateful and whatnot. And it was around this time that Allitt was trying to convince the family that they had a poltergeist. I mean, I'm not going to cast aspersions here on their IQ levels, but we all know that poltergeists are not real. Like, they're about as real as these nails or this hair. So, sorry, it's obviously what I'm talking about isn't actually funny. I'm just poking fun at me being fake, like a poltergeist. Anyway, I digress, and I'm just going to get back to the story. So it took the police 7 months to gather all the necessary evidence to charge Allitt. And during this time, the media presence at the ward was intense. And the ward 4 nurses were all sent flowers. And that way, obviously, the media believe that if you butter someone up, they're going to talk and give them the information that the media are looking for. And they were told by the hospital managers to stay quiet, and the nurses in question were reportedly to have felt guilt, and it actually caused one of the nurses to actually kill herself, which is terribly sad because obviously none of them had anything to feel guilty about. They, other than the ones that, done a misdiagnosis, but, as we discussed, accidents can and do happen. You're only human. Also, during this time, Allitt continued her contact with Katie Phillips' parents, and they actually allowed Allitt to take Katie for day trips out, and Allitt was still continuing her behaviour. I mean, I don't think she made any more attempts on Katie's life, but reports suggested that Allitt would tell them that Katie was about to go into convulsions, and obviously spark the fear back into Katie's parents. Katie's father actually complained to the police about their treatment of Beverly, and he was finally informed of Becky's results, obviously Katie's twin sister who passed away. He was finally informed of her results surrounding her death. So Allitt was rearrested in November 1991, and she was charged with 4 counts of murder, 11 counts of attempted murder, and 11 counts of GBH, so grievous bodily harm. And around this time, under examinations, she was diagnosed with Muncheasasons and Muncheasasons by proxy. So, obviously, at the start of this video, I spoke about, the attention-seeking behaviour, like, obviously, the feigning the illnesses and things like that. So, those of you who don't know what Muncheasasons is, or Muncheasasons by proxy, again, I'm not, um, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. Um, I think that's something that's better off spoken about by those kind of people. Like, I have a small understanding of what those conditions are, but I think you need to speak to someone who actually deals with it on a day-to-day basis, rather than a busted old drag queen talking about this. Even though I appreciate you all tuning in. Sorry, I kind of digress again. I keep doing a lot of that during this video. And obviously I'd want to try and take this seriously, but which I am. But I feel like, we all need like a little bit of humour at the moment, and but it's probably not landing with you guys, but hey ho. So she was held on remand and until her trial, and she was described as loud, bolshy, boisterous, and trying to run the wing that she was on. And her trial began in February 1993, sorry, and it lasted 2 months. And the judge said, I have to say I regard the determination in a minimum period in a case such as this, and fortunately, cases like this are rare. It is a difficult task. Allitt was only present at 16 days of her trial. So all the rest, that she continued to have illness. Now, obviously, like I said, she was diagnosed as Muncheasasons. So I believe in her psyche, she's thinking, oh, if I say that I'm ill, they're all going to feel a bit sorry for me. Justice Stanley Burton, the then sentencer, was a life sentence set at a minimum of 30 years, and Allitt has been held at Rampton Secure Hospital since her sentence. So, Rampton Secure Hospital, some of you guys may have heard of these places. There's very famously Broadmoor Hospital, which is in Berkshire, I believe. And there's also Ashworth in Kent, and which is a little bit disconcerting because I'm just over the bridge from Kent. I actually live in Thurrock, which is connected to Kent by the QE2 bridge. I don't know how far the actual hospital is from the bridge, but I'm just saying Kent's not far. And while her stay at Rampton, I believe during her early time at Rampton, she continued her sort of attention seeking, and she excuse me, she would do things like pour boiling water on herself. She was ingesting broken glass. It's a really high level, self-harm. I mean, it could actually end up risking her own life. I mean, arguably the world would be a better place without her, but at the end of the day, she's got to be seen to be serving her sentence. 2021, Allitt actually became eligible for parole. But as of now, so as of August 2023, she is actually still held in Rampton. So it's down to the parole parole board. If they see that she's no longer a threat to society. I'm really sorry, I burped. So yeah, if they don't see her as a threat to society, then obviously they have the power to say, you're free to go, which is kind of scary. Her victims' families have stated that they believe she should remain inside, as they believe she's still that threat. Obviously, back to the Lucy Letby case. Katie Phillips has reportedly expressed fears that if she is released, Allitt would come after her, but then other reports are stating that she's actually fearful that Lucy Letby is going to come after her. So obviously, you're getting a very similar story, but you're getting two different sides, almost like a coin. And 2022, it was reported that Allitt's father had left her over £10,000 in his will, and this was to be given when Allitt was released. And Allitt's case has been the subject of many TV documentaries. So that includes Lady Killers, which was actually presented by Martina Cole. And Martina is a really well-renowned crime author. I actually did get to meet her quite a few years ago. And my little claim to fame is I actually live in the town that she was born in. Look it up on Google. 2005, the BBC aired a program called Angel of Death. So Angel of Death was the moniker, nickname, whatever, that the media they gave to Allitt, because obviously nurses are seen as angels, and back in, I believe, the late 80s, early 90s, possibly. No, I was only born in 92. But I believe that there was a program about nurses that was called Angels. I think that was the case. I don't know. If anyone wants to correct me on that, then please feel free. And she, in Angel of Death, on the BBC, she was played by Charlie Brooks. For those of you who don't know who Charlie Brooks is, she played Janine on EastEnders. Probably one of the best soap characters, in my opinion. And just on a little side note before we switch off, Allitt was also the subject of the Black Sabbath song The Hand That Rocked the Cradle. Which, I mean, I get that some bands do things in poor taste, but to name a song that is in really poor taste, if I'm honest, guys. But obviously, from what I know, the album was released in 1994, so I was only 2 years old when that was released. So I don't actually know the song because Black Sabbath isn't a band that I'm not really familiar with. It's not really the sort of music that I choose to listen to. But one of my friends actually that I work with, he likes a bit of Black Sabbath. He's a massive fan of Ozzy, so I don't know if Ozzy was in the band in 1994, but I'll have a look. But anyway, thank you for listening, guys. Thank you for tuning in. I really hope I've done this well. As always, this video is dedicated to the victims of Allitt. And that is all of them, not just obviously the 4 that died. It's also for the rest that she did harm in the process. I really hope that you've all gone on to live the best lives that you can. So, thank you for everyone that's tuned in, and I will see you guys soon.